Hi, I'm Sam Gruber, an art and architectural historian with a specialty in Jewish art. I'm president of the International Survey of Jewish Monuments, and I've been pleased to be a friend of Ohavi Zedek Synagogue for more than a dozen years, since the rediscovery of the lost mural back in 2012. Today I'm going to speak about another recovered treasure now housed here at Ohavi Zedek, and this is the copper ark from the first building of the congregation, and now unfortunately lost to us as a functioning synagogue, but still here in memory with us through the survival of the physical remnants, the actual liturgical items, and the ark itself that was on the north wall of the synagogue and is now preserved and reconstructed in part in the present-day Ohavi Zedek Synagogue, located just a few blocks from the original building. The congregation was founded in the late 19th century, but the first synagogue building was built in 1887. It was wood-clad, wood-framed, and probably had no basement, no heating. It would have been a very, very simple structure, but enough for the men of the congregation, still a small congregation, to gather for their daily and weekly prayers. By 1902, 1903, the congregation had grown, had become a little more prosperous. Peddlers who were on the road in previous generations now settled more in Burlington. There were stores opening. Really, a Jewish community was coming into being, and the synagogue was made into a better place. So it went from a wood frame building to a wood frame building clad in brick. The second stage of renovation took place in the early 1930s, when the building was extended by 2 bays, and the north wall of the synagogue was remade with a large, imposing ark designed by the rabbi of the congregation, William Flax, who'd been there already 20 years, but executed by a congregant, Morris Wool. Now, Flax made this little model in wood. He carved it himself, and it conveys his idea of an essentially classical style ark with some unusual features, surmounted by 2 lions and with the Decalogue, that is the tablets of the law, and a Magen David, a Jewish star on top. Morris Wool was a metalsmith, and he wasn't going to make a wooden ark or a stone ark. Wool transformed this design into something extraordinary. He made an ark made out of copper. This is a moment of special artistic and liturgical transformation of the space. This is the element of Ohavi Zedek Synagogue that generations still remember. You can see the interior of the synagogue in its 1930s iteration. We're looking over the octagonal bima. This is where the Torah was read. There are wooden pews. Women were up in the galleries, and this is the norm for Orthodox synagogues of this time. Their view is focused on this new ark that's designed by Flax and Wool. The ark sits under an oculus, a round window. The windows were necessary in the walls of the synagogue, obviously, for letting in light for reading, but also to let you know when day turns into night, for calculating beginning of Shabbat. What is unusual here is the round window is nestled under what looks like a giant arch, but this arch sort of tapers, gets thinner toward the top, so that it looks like giant horns. This does recall the types of ancient altars that were known from biblical times, which were known as horned altars. But let me draw your attention to the ark itself, this copper ark. The model was gold. This is not unusual because in many arks, going back many centuries, if you've ever been to Venice, you'll see it in the synagogues there, the Scola Tedesca or the Scola Canton. They're wooden arks that are painted gold. And in the old synagogues, of course, there was no electricity, so it was all candlelight. And so you needed to have shiny surfaces in order to get better illumination. Now, when this was built in the 1930s, there was electricity. So the gold color was more about opulence. And this ties in with the concept of Hiddur Mitzvah, which is the the glorification of the commandment. It's a passage in Exodus, and this is often used as the rationale for spending money or for having highly talented artisans make liturgical objects for synagogues. And in this case, the gold that was decided, or the shining quality that was decided, is not just paint on carved wood, as is suggested perhaps by Rabbi Flax's model, but it is gleaming copper. And this copper has this reddish color that just shines. It is so brilliant. In the decades following the installation of the new Ark, the Jewish community in Burlington went through many changes. There had been 3 competing Orthodox congregations, in fact, often fighting and arguing, but the Depression, the strains of the Depression, forced many of their members to come together, and it ended in a merger of the 2 larger congregations, Ohavi Zedek and Chai Adam, where the mural was, and those congregations chose to continue to use the Ohavi Zedek building where the Ark was situated. Another congregation, though, did not merge, and this was a smaller congregation, Ahavath Gerim, and they continued as a separate entity. In 1952, so after the Depression, after World War II, at a period of greater prosperity and the returning GIs and kind of new optimism in the American Jewish community, the old synagogue wasn't sufficient for many, many reasons, functionally and structurally, and it was time to build something new. And in the early 1950s, the present-day Ohavi Zedek was designed and erected, but it meant a new identity. And the combined congregation shifted from a more traditional Orthodoxy to conservative Judaism, but it also was more open and more modern to this younger generation. So as they moved from the old synagogue to the new synagogue, they left the Ark behind. But it wasn't lost, it wasn't destroyed, because what happened is Ahavath Gerim, that third congregation, took over Ohavi Zedek's old building, and from 1952 until quite recently, that synagogue survived. It dwindled, but it continued to use the sanctuary and to pray in front of the copper Ark. The future of the building was uncertain. And through many vicissitudes, it was impossible to save the building. It went up for sale in 2023. There was great alarm among people who value the history of the congregation and the history of Jewish art in the region. And a very quick and last-minute effort was made to rescue the art and the liturgical items from the building. The shell of the building was going to be maintained, but everyone knew that the interior was going to be reconfigured, and it was imperative to get these things out if they were to survive. The Ark was removed and in pieces brought here. And then it's been reconstructed as much as the space will allow. The room itself is not as tall as the old synagogue, and in order to accommodate this space, the 3 steps leading up to the Ark have been removed, and we approach the Ark on a level. This is not the traditional way to approach an Ark. There was always the going up to the Ark, ascending, and the Torah scrolls would be kept at an elevated level above the congregation. There are other problems as well. There's a drop ceiling in this room which obscures the top of the Ark with its lions and its crown, and eventually this will be adjusted so that you'll see the full Ark. And then there are grand plans to actually expand this space, to break out this wall and to create a larger space that is more in keeping with the original proportions of the Ark wall of the 1932 extension of Ohavi Zedek. Overall, the Ark is a classical Ark. These are fluted pilasters, that is, flat columns that are applied to a wall. This is a pediment in a traditional Greek or Roman manner, but it's broken, and it has a little more kind of oomph, a little more Baroque lift and style to it. And then it breaks again at the top, where in a classical temple there would be a point, And this is where the hands of the Kohanim, the priestly blessing, is presented. And this then lifts up the Ten Commandments. Interestingly, above the Ten Commandments are Stars of David, the Magen David, in circles. And this is probably indicative of the time of the 1930s when this was made, because by this time the Magen David had become very associated with Zionism. And in the 1930s, Jewish settlers in then British Palestine were struggling to create a new nation. And American Jews, particularly Orthodox and conservative Jews, rallied behind this particular movement. And of course, we know that eventually, in 1948, this would result in the creation of the State of Israel. Above this, there is a very unusual bell-shaped crown. And this is the crown of the Torah, which is on top of the commandments. And on top of the crown is another Magen David. And on top of this is a little eagle. So it's really like a wedding cake of symbols, not unlike the type of stacking of symbols that we see in the mural from the Chai Adam synagogue. This was typical of Jewish decoration for many hundreds of years. If you could say it many times, why not do it? And anyone who is familiar with Jewish liturgy and attends Jewish religious services will know that many, many prayers repeat themselves, and the same kind of language is again and again used as ways to extol Adonai and to express thanks, gratitude, or obligation. We're very close to these lamps, these sconces, which have these vegetal forms. They're sort of like acorns or a little bit like pine cones. It is a classical element that we see in ancient decorations. Rabbi Flax was probably thinking of forms that are traditional in Jewish art, like the pine cone and the pomegranate, which because of their many, many seeds are often associated with the 613 commandments. The last and most magnificent element of the upper part of the ark are two beautifully carved lions that flank the tablets of the law and the crown. Rabbi Flax probably carved these himself. The lions, of course, are known in many, many cultures as signs of royalty and power. In Judaism, they also have very many meanings too. We think of them as the lions of Judah, and the lions of Judah are really the people of Israel, because that's who we are, Jews from the kingdom of Judah, from the tribe of Judah. Judah's sign is the lion. The lion is the protector. The lion is also the supporter. And as the Jewish people, the lions both respect and protect the law. They also hold it up. So it's both an inspiration for Jews to protect and hold up the law, and it's an admonition, meaning that the law will be protected. Now, this is one of the most common motifs in all of Jewish art, and you'll see it on a parochet, you'll see it on a breastplate for a Torah scroll, you'll see it in books, you'll see it again and again. I think everyone's going to experience this ark differently, and a lot of it has to do about the way you approach prayer, you approach community, you approach history, and you approach Jewish art. It's a marvelous example of a kind of immigrant experience and a kind of a transcendence from the everyday of the immigrant experience to this realm of spiritual beauty. The immigrant shuls of the early 20th century were filled with art, all sorts of liturgical art, that we don't even know about because it was never photographed and so much of it has been lost. We have nothing like this copper ark. It probably was unique when it was made. I mean, there are some very fancy bronze arks in synagogues like Emmanuel in New York, but in an immigrant shul, in an Orthodox immigrant shul, I don't know of anything else like this. So this is a very special ark. It is not the only ark to be saved, but it's the only metal one we know of, certainly the only one of copper, so it's remarkable for that alone.